Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the war of propaganda that surrounds the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. For many, it is confusing, but in reality, most of the time, it's pretty straightforward. The truth comes out clear as day. That happens despite attempts to outright lie about what is happening. This world, by and large, is divided into three camps, two smaller and one larger. Group one supports the Palestinians, and they will not be convinced that Israel even has a right to exist. Israel is always wrong in their eyes. Israel is the oppressor, and the Palestinians are the victims, no matter what they do. Israel is the occupier, the supplanter, the thief. Because of this perspective, terror is justified. They see terror as a natural outgrowth or outcome. No argument will sway them. Group two is the other side. They support Israel. They are lovers of Israel. In their eyes, Israel has the right to exist and must defend itself at all costs. The terror from the Palestinians is murder and never justified. For them, those who do not see the historical links or recognize that for decades and even centuries, Arabs have acted murderously to oust the Jews, first from Palestine and then from Israel, way before the '67 war, are not being honest. This group wants peace, but not at any cost. They want to ensure security. Terror does not bring security, the opposite in their eyes. This group incorporates left and right in Israel, from the very left to the extreme right. Anyone who considers themselves Zionists. Then there's the third group. The third group does not really care. They have no real interest. This is by far the largest group. This is the group that needs to be convinced. It is a waste of time to even try to convince the others. These are the people in the middle. Many of the people in the middle want to be neutral. They want to be friends with both sides. The problem is, with this philosophy, it sometimes meshes the value of being impartial, which overshadows the concept of right versus wrong and good versus evil. Now we have the example of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, also known as Abu Mazen. Abbas gave a speech on October 14th, 2015, and it was all based on lies. And those lies continue to fan the flames of terror. The Palestinian president hopes that Europe and the West will believe him and will apply pressure on Israel. More than that, he hopes that the rest of the world, especially the Muslim world, will be so up in arms by the stories he tells and the lies that he gives over as truths that they will rise up and crush Israel and all of her supporters. Abbas claimed that Israel executed 13-year-old Ahmed Mansoura, a Palestinian boy. He said that Israelis were executing Palestinian children. Subsequently, the official PA translation, by the way, toned down the word executions and replaced it with the words cold-blooded murder. He held up the picture of the boy on the ground after having been shot, so he thought, but he wasn't shot at all. He said the Israelis executed him. This all took place in Pisgat Zev, an area located between Jerusalem and Ramallah. What Abbas did not say is that the boy, Mansoura, and his 15-year-old cousin, Hassan, had moments before that picture was taken stabbed two Israeli boys, one who had just jumped on his bicycle after buying candy in a local candy store. That boy, the Israeli boy, is critically wounded and fighting for his life. What Abbas did not say is that Mansoura is alive, with no threat to his life, being treated at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. Abbas, the man who is supposed to be the partner in peace of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, knowingly and in good conscience lied, and it was a whopper. In that same speech, Abbas said that the Israelis are trying to change the status quo on the Temple Mount. He said that the Israeli attack against our people, our land, and our holy places threatens peace and stability, unquote. And then he continued, We have said it clearly. We will not accept a change in status quo at Al-Aqsa Mosque that would damage its sanctity and its character. It is our right to continue our peaceful struggle in order to achieve our independence, and our victory will come. Our peaceful struggle? Did he actually use those words? He did. Abbas used expressions like Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, their holy places, and their homes. He spoke of executions of children like Ahmed Mansoura. He actually calls the terrorists victims, and he calls them heroes. And the Arabic press backs him up. Here are two Arabic press headlines. The first one reads, "Palestinian child bleeds to death while Israeli police and civilians watch, shouting insults." The second reads, "Teen shot by Israelis, stomped on, left to bleed to death." It's all about incitement, and Abbas is one of its loudest, most authoritative voices. Israel has no interest in changing the status quo on the Temple Mount. They would like to stop the stone throwing from up there to down to the worshippers at the Western Wall. But that's it. The Israeli government is doing nothing that would even suggest that they harbor thoughts about the holy site, other than sifting through the refuse that the Waqf, the Muslim religious body responsible for the site, had dug out and dumped into a landfill. Israel has found some remarkable archaeological discoveries in that garbage pile. The official Israeli response of the prime minister that he released the other day in a statement said, quote, "Abbas's speech tonight was filled with incitement and lies. The young boy he referred to is currently hospitalized at Hadassah after he stabbed an Israeli child who was riding his bike," unquote. Netanyahu's office tried to counter the lies by saying, quote, "While Israel protects the status quo on the Temple Mount, Abbas has used religion to incite more acts of terror." The real proof is in the videos. Surveillance videos up on social media show footage of Ahmed Mansoura and his cousin walking by an intersection and then running back with knives. Each boy is carrying the knife in their right hand and running. The Palestinian supporters, however, have posted only videos in which the police and Israelis look like murderers. But when you look carefully, the video shows the police holding Mansoura's knife. The hospital says that he suffered injuries but was not shot. Interestingly, Hassan, the 15-year-old cousin, was shot to death. He is seen in the video with a knife raised in his right hand, running across the street, lunging at the police as he's shot. To achieve his goal of raising a global Muslim outcry against Israel, the Palestinian leader is exploiting sensitive chords that resound throughout the Muslim world. He's suggesting that Jews are taking over the noble sanctuary, aka the Temple Mount, the third holiest spot in Islam, and he's suggesting that Jews are executing children. Abbas is playing right into the ugliest and most dangerous stereotypes in Muslim culture. If Abbas is successful, there will be an uprising far bigger than simply another intifada. If he is successful, not only Israel, but the West as well will erupt and explode in a wave of anti-Western violence. If this state of affairs continues, there will be no controls. It is highly doubtful that even Abbas at this point has the influence or ability to stifle the terror. He can rev them up, but he can't rein them in. And in the end, this violence will occupy the West. It will probably also consume PA President Mahmoud Abbas and his cause as well. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up, a column from the New York Times. It was published on Monday, October 19th, 2015. The author is Nathan Thrall. The piece is called Mismanaging the Conflict in Jerusalem. Thrall is a senior analyst at the International Crisis Group. Thrall writes very often on these issues. He lives in Jerusalem. A few words about the International Crisis Group. It was created to try to help resolve international issues. It provides insight and services and presents diplomatic solutions to countries, especially to countries who do not have a deep bench when it comes to diplomacy. They are extremely left of center. George Soros is on their board. In addition, they divide their tasks into regions, and then the regions are divided into countries. The International Crisis Group bundles Israel with Palestine. They put a slash between them. Israel Israel/Palestine, not and Palestine. They make it one unit. That is seriously problematic. It shows an extreme bias, as if to say they should be one country. Here's how Nathan Thrall begins his column, Mismanaging the Conflict in Jerusalem, which from its very title tells you what Nathan Thrall thinks about the issue. He writes from Jerusalem, "The streets of Jewish West Jerusalem are eerie and still. Silence hangs over the city, punctured occasionally by a siren's wail. Buses are half empty, as is the light rail that runs alongside the walls of the old city. Heavily armed security forces, joined by army reinforcements, patrol checkpoints, bus stops, and deserted sidewalks. Young men in plain clothes carry assault rifles. The evening news broadcasts images of stabbings and shootings. Among the few shops doing good business are those selling weapons and pepper spray." Thrall writes like an essayist. He's descriptive. Here is an example an essayist would use in terms of writing a column. You don't write that way in writing columns. In columns, you write points, not descriptions. Columns should not begin this way at all. But what he wants us to do is picture the scene in Jerusalem, a city that he depicts as oppressive to Palestinians. Now Thrall lists all the misdeeds of Israel and how they oppress the Palestinians, to the point of them wearing kippot to avoid being hassled. The reader imagines Arabs putting on Jewish garments to avoid being stopped and questioned by security. Now Thrall says that because of the violence, real change has occurred throughout the history of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. He cites studies that show that the compromise happened only after violence. That's scary. He writes, "The Jewish public's mood is shifting, as it did during the Second Intifada. It was during the worst month of those 4 horrific years, in March of 2002, that pollsters found peak Israeli support for territorial concessions proposed by President Bill Clinton in December of 2000, including a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem with sovereignty over Al-Aqsa compound. Last week, about 2/3 of Jewish Israelis surveyed in a poll said they wish to separate from Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, excluding the Old City." In his defense, Thrall does at this point also blame Abbas and says that he is very unpopular. Thrall's reason for Abbas's loss in popularity, by the way, is that after more than a decade in power, Abbas has not delivered. But Thrall continues, "To date, the unrest has not approached the scale that led successive prime ministers to partial withdrawals. Yitzhak Rabin's bestowing limited autonomy on Palestinians in parts of Gaza and in the West Bank at the end of the First Intifada. Benjamin Netanyahu is pulling out of most of Hebron after the deadly 1996 riots over Israeli excavations beneath the Al-Aqsa compound. And Ariel Sharon's announcing a withdrawal from Gaza during the Second Intifada." Thrall then delivers the kicker. "Yet, if they succeed only in ending the unrest, they will have merely restored the status that gave rise to it. That is what Israelis call managing the conflict. There is certainly no guarantee that if the two leaders fail to stop the flow of Palestinian and Israeli blood, things will eventually get better. But what does seem guaranteed is that most Palestinians will continue to believe that if the occupation is cost-free, there will be little incentive to end it. Mr. Abbas and Mr. Netanyahu have taught them that." At least in the end, Thrall blames all the leaders. He blames not only Netanyahu, but also Abbas and Kerry too. The biggest problem in his analysis is that Thrall gives too much credit to the masses. He assumes that they hope to achieve a goal, his goal. In reality, most of the violence is stemming from the false rumors that Israel is changing the status quo on the Temple Mount, not about political independence or occupation. Thrall is wrong here. Second up is a column from the Wall Street Journal. It was published on Monday, October 19th, 2015. It was published on the exact same day as the Thrall piece in the New York Times. It was a day of dueling columns between the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. This piece could not be more different. It was the mirror image of Nathan Thrall's column. This column got its title from a quote by Abbas from a speech he made on September 16th, 2015. The column is entitled, Abbas, We Welcome Every Drop of Blood Spilled in Jerusalem. Palestinian leaders have created a culture of death that is motivating the latest violent terrorism. That's the title. The column is written by Tzipi Hotovely. The byline describes her as Israel's deputy foreign minister, which is true, but her more essential and far more impressive position is that she is the minister of justice. Hotovely begins by laying out her thesis. The latest surge of Palestinian terror attacks against Israelis has come in the immediate wake of explicit calls by Palestinian leadership to spill blood. This well-orchestrated campaign of violence follows many years in which Palestinian children have been taught to idolize the murder of Jews as a sacred value and to regard their own death in this jihad as the pinnacle of their aspirations. Such violence has deep roots. It goes back to the rampages at the behest of Haj Amin al-Husseini, a Muslim activist, and at one point the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. It continued with the Fedayeen, the Palestinian militants in the 1950s and 60s, and evolved into the terrorism of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Fatah under Yasser Arafat, and now Mahmoud Abbas. Anyone who claims that Palestinian terror against Jews dates only to 1967 or is a response to Israeli settlements should become more informed of the conflict's history. Then Hotovely quotes Abbas from the September 16th speech. Mr. Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, said the following on Palestinian television on September 16th. We welcome every drop of blood spilled in Jerusalem. This is pure blood, clean blood, blood on its way to Allah. With the help of Allah, every martyr will be in heaven, and every wounded will get his reward. She describes how a few days later, Eitam and Naama Henkin were brutally murdered by terrorists in front of their 4 children. Hotovely shows that Palestinian leadership and schools glorify and teach a culture of death, while Israeli schools teach peace. Israeli society and Jewish traditions sanctify life. Palestinian society glorifies death. Israeli children grow up on songs of peace and the biblical vision of a nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Palestinian children are taught to hate, turning a blind eye to the enormous harm that the Palestinian leadership is doing to its own people by raising successive generations of children on blind hatred of the Jews, and Israel is dooming these children to a bleak future. This ought to be a compelling reason for the international community to seriously rethink the strange tolerance it exhibits towards the Palestinian death culture. Changing this culture of death is no less important for the Palestinians than for Israel. Her point is very clear and well taken, but unfortunately, it will fall on deaf ears. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. Let's look at 4 cartoons today. They're all courtesy of the Palestinian Media Watch, or PMW. Palestinian Media Watch is an essential resource for any of you or me interested in finding out what is being said by the Palestinian media itself in Arabic. Palestinian Media Watch is an important tool. It's run by Itamar Marcus, who has been a guest on JBS, a native of New York City who has lived in Israel for many, many years. The 4 cartoons are all posted over a very short period of time in the midst of this terror spree. We'll do them in chronological order. First up is from September 19th. It was posted on the official website of the Palestinian Commission on Information and Culture. It portrays Israel as ISIS in a hooded black executioner's outfit. Palestine and the Mosque of Al-Aqsa are on the executioner's chopping block. There's a Star of David on the executioner's black hood. Across the outfit reads Judaization. In other words, Israel is killing, murdering, and destroying Palestine and Judaizing Al-Aqsa. This is the heart of the libel against the Jews. Next up is from October 8th, and it was published in Al-Hayat Al-Jadida, a newspaper. It portrays an Israeli soldier running for cover as it rains down rocks on him, and the caption reads, "Winter has returned." This is a play on the change of the season. Winter season in the region actually brings the rains. And in this part of the world, it does not rain for 6 months, from April to October. Next up is a cartoon from El Ayam and was published on October 9th. It portrays a Palestinian throwing a rock. The Palestinian flag is in the background, and the caption reads, "Advance, advance." In other words, forward, forward, keep doing it. The artist is simply saying, keep on fighting. And finally, the last cartoon is from October 12th. It was posted on the Fatah Twitter feed. At first glance, the cartoon portrays a Palestinian wearing a keffiyeh and playing a violin, with the old city in the background, and Al-Aqsa is very prominent. But he is not playing a violin at all. He's actually playing a murderous hunting knife. And instead of a bow in his hand, he's playing it with an old-fashioned key. The key symbolizes the return of Palestinians to their homes. This is a very strong symbol in Palestinian culture, even stronger than the knife and the machine gun. All 4 cartoons are intended to incite terror. Sadly, these are just a few of many. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. While it's definitely terror, the terror that Israel is confronting today is different from the terror Israel faced in the past. One significant difference is that the terrorists attacking Israelis over the past few weeks actually hold Israeli IDs. The ID is known in Hebrew as Tudat Zahut. This is true for many attacks perpetrated throughout the country, but almost every attack perpetrated in Jerusalem is the case. Holders of Israeli IDs have an easier time making their way in Jerusalem and around the country than those without Israeli identification certificates. One way of securing Israel is to cut it off from the West Bank and to limit the movement of people who do not have Israeli IDs. That is done by way of roadblocks and police and army patrols roaming and checking for IDs. When terrorists carry Israeli IDs, they more easily blend into the crowd. Today's terrorists need to be sniffed out through behavior, action, signs, and signals that alert trained security personnel that something is going wrong. The old city of Jerusalem is blanketed with monitors, security cameras, and has teams of people watching those cameras and alerting police in the field to anything unusual or anyone arousing suspicion. Cell phones, messages are canvassed. That means that all communication is tapped. Emails, SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, all of them are all monitored in real time. If you broadcast or send a message in certain areas, know that it will be read. Israel is defending itself from threats perpetrated by Palestinians who live over the Green Line and inside Israel. Israelis are using highly sophisticated tools, operated by top-notch techies and highly trained technicians. Even then, terrorists still slip through the cracks. Recently, 12 drowning Syrians and Iraqi refugees were fished out of the sea near Greece by an Israeli private yacht. The Israelis saved the refugees, who were wearing life vests and floating in the sea. Their raft was destroyed. Unfortunately, a 6-month-old infant died in the water, cradled in her mother's arms. She held the dead baby the entire time in the yacht. An older man had a heart attack while in the water and suffered diabetic shock. He was given sweets and administered first aid. Everyone received food, water, and phones to call their families. The Greek Navy was alerted, and they came to pick up the refugees after a few hours. When the refugees were told that their saviors were Israelis, the refugees hugged and kissed the Israelis. The Israelis were not simply motivated by the code of maritime law and culture. These Israelis saved people in need. Israelis in general save people in need. In an example of how things are changing in the era of the post-Iran nuke deal, India paid Iran $700 million recently. It was the second in 2 installments totaling $1.4 billion. Iran has been providing oil to India. However, under the sanctions, India could not pay them back. But now they're paying. Iran is India's 7th largest supplier of oil. Before 2013, when sanctions were kicked in, Iran was their number 2 supplier. Even during sanctions, India found a way through a back door in Turkey to actually get and pay Iran. But that was discovered and blocked. India has deposited another 170 billion rupees, which is equivalent to 2.6 billion in their own UCO bank, which is, of course, headquartered in India. This money will also be transferred to Iran. There's one snag, though. India will not convert the rupees into dollars, and that's what Iran wants. I know it sounds weird, backwards even. Why does Iran, the nation pit against the United States, want US dollars? Iran is the nemesis of the United States. There's no other nation in the world, not North Korea, not Cuba, that has that distinction. The answer to why Iran wants US dollars is clear. Iran does business in the world that honors the greenback. They want the dollar to support their economy. Finally, September 26th, a stampede of people just outside of Mecca trampled 769 people to death and injured 939. All knew that the numbers were low and that the numbers of deaths would creep higher and higher and higher. But there was no official Saudi update on the numbers. AP recently released, the Associated Press, they did their own tally, and they said that to their count there were 2,117 Muslim pilgrims that died in that stampede. Every time I have reviewed this material, I need to update the numbers. The victims came from 42 nations, 42 countries. This past Sunday, a meeting took place in Saudi Arabia chaired by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Naif, who was also the Minister of the Interior. The Saudi press agency reported on the meeting saying the Crown Prince was reassured on the progress of the investigations. He directed the committee's members to continue their efforts to find the causes of the accident, praying to Allah the Almighty to accept the martyrs and wishing the injured a speedy recovery. Well, if the Saudis cannot update their own numbers, it's very unlikely that the Saudis will actually conduct a true investigation, and the numbers of the deaths reported or not will probably still go higher. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one picante piece of information. We've been talking a lot about the status quo. In the Middle East context, status quo means as is. Leave it be, don't touch. The expression is Latin. Status means situation. Quo in Latin means equal to. We say quid pro quo, and we explain that to mean something for something, but it doesn't mean that. It means quid, something, pro, for, quo, something of equal value. The word quotient means equal. Equivalent is the same root. Even the word quote or quotation means saying or writing the same words that someone else read or wrote. Equal, all these come from the same Latin word, quo. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.